Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whiskey. My name's VinPF, and on today's episode you might notice we're back in the studio. Sorry about the outside location, but as we might know, in the UK sometimes it gets a little bit hot, but we're not actually set up to deal with that kind of heat in the UK. Most of us, I would say most of us, don't really have much air conditioning, or at least outside of their own vehicles. My car has air conditioning, but my house does not. So the studio with all the lights and stuff gets a little bit warm, so it's nice to go outside and enjoy a dram out there. In any case, it's now a little bit cooler. I'm back in the studio, and today we've got another Heroes and Heretics bottle for you. So thank you to them for sending that over to me. This is the first in a range called the Higginbottom. Now this range deals with kind of single cask stuff, and it's really kind of like, in my opinion anyway, the kind of epitome of no nonsense whiskey. It really is just about the whiskey. There's no stories involved. There's no kind of nonsense around it. All the information you need is on the actual label itself. And you just get good quality whiskey for what I would consider a reasonable price. And we'll get into that later on in the video when I talk about the value of the actual whiskey. Now today you might notice, if you can see on here, this says whiskey with an E. This is an American whiskey. This isn't bourbon. That's a key thing to note. This is a Heaven Hill, as you might have seen on the title already, a Heaven Hill American whiskey. There you go. Heaven Hill American whiskey. So, something you need to know about this. Now, they probably would have called it bourbon if it was the bourbon mash bill. If you're into your Heaven Hills of any stretch, I haven't really covered much Heaven Hill on the channel, but they do cover a whole heap of different brand names. They don't often go under their own Heaven Hill label, but they have a whole heap of different mash bills, from kind of a bourbon, a rye, a wheated bourbon, that sort of thing. So because they've called this American whiskey, I'm going to make a rash assumption that this is the malt whiskey mash bill, which is 65% malted barley and 35% corn. Of course, a bourbon would need to be at least 51% corn, the rest probably made up with rye and a little bit of malted barley at the end to keep it all going. In any case, what we have here is an 8-year-old Heaven Hill American whiskey, by all accounts. Now, some information on the actual bottle itself, as you can see on here. Usually they'd say cask type here. They would probably say something like ex-bourbon, but of course, because this is an American whiskey, it would have been new oak, so at the moment it just says barrel, which is, fair enough. You can't just put non-applicable or something like that. So this will be a fresh American oak barrel. Cask number 152736, if you're interested in such things. I'm sure Heaven Hill have some kind of way of tracking that if you're interested in finding out where this was kept or anything like that. Distilled on the 31st of the 5th, 2009, and bottled on the 21st of the 11th, 2017. It's also bottle number 362 of 400. Limited release. And you can pick this up for around 60 quid. That's the kind of retail price. But if you go onto the Heroes and Heretics website, there's a link in the description below. You can join their tribe and get 10% off that. So in the UK, you're looking at about £54. This is also a 63.5% whiskey, which is not to be underestimated. Love that sort of thing. A couple of extra bits on top of here. No chill filtration, single cask, no colorants. All things that we like on this channel. As I've said a million times before, colouring doesn't tend to bother me too much as long as it's stated on the actual label itself, which it isn't very often, unless you get a travel retail bottle or a bottle from Germany or something like that, where it is the law to state that on the label. I wish the SWA would make that the law. That's a different story. So we talked about this being 60 quid. Now that's a lot of money. As you might have noticed, this is a half-litre bottle, whereas the rest of the range that I've covered so far of Heroes and Heretics is 70. This Higginbottom range is half-litre, so I've got another one just sitting right here ready to go. That'll be a video coming up soon. That's a 27-year-old Bunnahabhain. So yeah, keep an eye on that because I'm going to be covering that in the next few months. So half-litre, obviously you have to scale that around for what we would consider a kind of full-size bottle, a 700 in the UK. I know in America sometimes you get 750s, which is pretty awesome. A 500 at 60 quid would probably upscale to something like 80, 90 odd pounds at full size. I haven't done the maths, probably should have. In any case, it's a pretty well-priced dram. If you look on Master of Malt, as I did, there are some other single cask options, things like that Boutique Whiskey Company, and it's pretty much in line with those. In fact, I would say, although the ages of those are probably a little bit higher, you're looking at a lower ABV most of the time. So it depends on what you're after of these things. Age is but a number after all. If we're talking about numbers on labels, I prefer to have a higher of this number than I do of this number. That's just my personal things. Enough talking about that. Let's get into the whiskey itself. After all, that's what we're all here for. On the nose then. Oh, now, I don't get to cover many American whiskies over on the channel. There is a lot of availability in the UK these days. There wasn't when I actually started the channel, but it's getting better and better. But I just get what I can. But I'm a big fan of the nose on these things. Really big, bold flavours. For me, I'm getting lots of vanillas off of this. Caramels, toffees, kind of buttery biscuit kind of flavour going on in there. On the back end, there's some kind of tannic notes, some kind of leathery, oaky kind of notes there as well. Now, I would say if you're into your bourbons in any way, shape or form, you're probably going to enjoy this, and you probably would confuse this for a proper bourbon as you smelt it, because there's a lot of those corn influences. We're talking 35%, that's over a third of it is still the corn influence. Just not half, as you might expect. And the malted barley doesn't really have much impact on it. You know, traditionally you would have a lot of rye in these kinds of things. And for me, that gives a kind of heat, an extra layer of spiciness to it. Whereas the malted barley is kind of gentle, so it kind of tones it down, I guess. It's probably an accessible American whiskey, I would say. Let's get onto the palate. Now, whoa, it's a real heavy hitter. Lots of ABV going on there. The first things that really strike the palate are the kind of oakiness of it all. Of course, we are talking about a new oak, so the oak influence is really heavy there. Obviously, that's natural colour. That's kind of what you typically would expect. It's, of course, aged in America as well. And the specifics of where this distillery is, it's a really nice climate, I would say. Like in Scotland, for instance, in the UK, it's a pretty typical climate. It doesn't change much between day and night, maybe a few degrees here and there, depending on the season. But of course, in Kentucky, the difference in temperature between day and night is quite astounding. So you're getting a higher age influence, let's say, quicker. So what might take to get the same oak influence in Scotland might take double the amount of time. I don't know the science, but you can age it quicker in America is what I'm saying, especially specifically in Kentucky, where a lot of American whiskies are made. I went to Texas last year, and the heat in October was like 40 degrees centigrade, so it was like 100 Fahrenheit, and I am just not equipped to deal with that kind of heat. And making whiskey over there, you can make astounding things in only a couple of years. Anyway, I digress. More on the palate, I said oak and a lot of spice. The spice is kind of cinnamony led. Interestingly though, when that kind of disappears, you're getting a nice cherry element to it as well, which I find quite tasty. One more sip. Now the finish is absolutely huge. More cherry influence. Well, it just really gets my taste buds really salivating, really beautiful. Hugely long, loads of spices, loads of oak. Lots to be enjoyed here if you're into that kind of American style. If you're not into bourbon at all, I would say if you've tried a lot of bourbons and a lot of American whiskies, it's going to be a push whether you're going to enjoy this or not, I have to say, because it's very bold and very big. But if you are into those kind of flavours like I am, there's lots to be enjoyed here for a very good value indeed.